A tax on flavour. Should gut-busting Britons be slapped with even more price hikes, this time on sugar and salt?
How can you, as a medical man, come on the air and lie like that?
He's talking rubbish.
Absolute nonsense. Graham MacGregor just thinks he can come on the air and just say anything he wants.
You can let me talk, I let you talk.
What are you going to put into a Mars bar if it's not sugar? Tell us.
This is Talk Radio TV's Political Punch-Up. The government's been told to slap 7p on a Mars bar, a penny on a packet of crisps, and even more on restaurant food. That's the verdict of food expert Henry Dimbleby, who wants us to cut around 40 calories a day each. Being forced to spend more cash on junk food, he says, means we'll tighten our belts and, rather than pounds of cash, we'll instead lose pounds from our waistlines. But it's so unpopular already that this afternoon Boris Johnson has trashed his own experts' plans and says he's not attracted to the idea of extra taxes on hard-working people. So who's right? Henry Dimbleby, the co-founder of healthy fast food chain Leon, or our self-confessed out-of-shape Prime Minister? Well, to debate this, I'm joined by Christopher Snowdon. He's head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and Professor Graham MacGregor. He's chairman of Action on Sugar. Graham MacGregor, this is just nanny statism, isn't it? They're saying that they can't trust people even to choose what food they eat. What do you think of that?
Well, it's totally untrue what is being said. This tax is designed to reformulate. The food industry has been asked to slowly reduce the amount of salt and sugar in these unhealthy foods and has not done it. And it easily could do so. And this tax will make them do it because we had experience with the soft drink levy, which has been very successful, that if you get your soft drink below a certain level, you don't pay the tax. Now, these taxes on other unhealthy foods are identical. If you get the salt below the target, you don't pay the tax, get the sugar below. So it's up to the food industry to reformulate. They've been given a long time to do this, and it's a very sensible policy because it means the food is slowly improved. You go on buying the same stuff, the costs won't go up because the food industry will meet that target and you're actually eating more healthily.
That's a fair point, isn't it, Christopher Snowdon? Because we've all been in those food outlets, we've been in restaurants and they say, well, you've got to pay another 20p for a Coke, for example, rather than a Diet Coke. It makes sense, doesn't it?
Well, it shows an incredible naivety, actually, about how food is cooked, how it's manufactured, how it's processed. You can do that, you're right, with sugary drinks because there's no effect on the texture because it doesn't have a texture. There's no effect on the weight. The weight doesn't matter. Totally different with all food products and especially foods high in sugar. I mean, chocolate bars, for example. I mean, you just can't do it. Artificial sweeteners are 100 times sweeter than sugar, which means that you need only 1% of the weight. So where does the rest of the weight come from? You're going to put protein in there, you're going to put fat in there. Fat's got more calories than sugar. They've taken the model from the sugar tax, which hasn't actually been successful in reducing obesity. It's just reduced sugar in a few brands of drink. I mean, it's not a massive success. And they're trying to apply that now to food. It's not going to work. The food industry literally can't do it with all the will in the world. They would love to be selling foods with more artificial sweeteners in them because they're cheaper than sugar. If they could produce food that people enjoyed, was palatable, and had fewer calories, less fat, less sugar, less salt, they would be cleaning up. It's not possible.
So, Christopher, what do we do? I mean, as a nation, we're getting fatter, we're getting unhealthier. What do we do to try to encourage people to eat more healthily? Because whatever's with health promotion at the moment, it's just not working, is it?
Well, obesity rates certainly aren't going down. They're gradually amongst adults going up, and amongst children, indeed, since the sugar tax came in, they've gone up a little bit. I mean, I'm not particularly interested in obesity. I don't really care how much other people weigh. I don't really like this curtain twitching, judgmental mentality that we're developing. I think it's rather ugly. I'm much more interested in people's prosperity and freedom. That's what I see being constantly undermined by nanny statists.
So, Graham MacGregor, is this just fat shaming? Should we take the focus off people because they're too fat?
Typical of old Chris and the Institute of Economic Affairs. Remember, they're funded by the tobacco, alcohol and food industries. It's not surprising what he's saying. He's talking rubbish. First of all, the soft drink levy, which came in 2 years ago, has reduced sugar consumption from sugar-sweetened soft drinks by 35%. 35%. And to say it hasn't worked is absolute rubbish. He said it wouldn't work, and he should now admit it has. These taxes
obesity hasn't gone down, has it?
Just let
Can
me
you name
finish.
these food companies that fund us, by the way, Graham? Because you often say this when we're on the radio. Which food companies? This is news to me.
You can let me talk. I let you talk. And what he's saying about these, we have obviously looked very carefully into the reformulation of sugar. It is possible to do in most products, and where it's not, the big food companies are working on non-calorie foods, for fillers, which will allow the elimination or get down the sugar levels in it. So it's possible to do it. And with salt, we've been very successful in reformulating salt by the food industry, and I've got to congratulate the food industry. It's a very entrepreneurial food industry we have in the UK, and it can do this. And Henry Dimbleby is not a fool. He's talked to them, and they've actually asked for it. The chief executives of several food companies have actually said, we want to be regulated, we want to have a tax in order to get the other ones who won't give us a level playing field to play games.
But surely, Graham MacGregor, the people who are already paying a lot of tax, the people who are already buying this food because they want to eat it, will bear the brunt of that tax at some stage within the chain.
No, the tax won't go up. If you hit the target, this is a misunderstanding. If you hit the target, like the soft drink tax, most soft drink tax are 10 grams per 100 of sugar, 10 grams per 100 ml. If you get it below 5, you don't pay the tax.
So what if you just like the taste of a Mars bar?
Well, you can take out the sugar. We put back other things which have got less calories in. It's possible to do it. You have to be entrepreneurial.
Christopher Snowdon, what do you think of that?
It's just absolute nonsense. Graham MacGregor just thinks he can come on the air and just say anything he wants. There's just no truth in anything he's saying. Obesity hasn't gone down since the sugar tax came in at all. You can't just put in. What are we going to put in? What are you going to put into a Mars bar if it's not sugar? Tell us. You can't, because this is pie in the sky.
Let's have Graham MacGregor's reaction to that. Graham MacGregor, what do you think?
Well, it's not true. And the other point that Chris Snowden is saying, he doesn't care about obesity, but presumably he pays taxes, and he's paying around £15 billion a year to look after people with type 2 diabetes, which is entirely due to obesity and eating unhealthily.
Why do you lie like this? It's not entirely due to obesity. How can you, as a medical man, come on the air and lie like that? I don't understand it.
I'm not lying. You just said
you know that there are many causes of diabetes.
Let's hear what Graham MacGregor's response to that is. Graham MacGregor, respond to that, please.
I'm sorry. He's doing his usual trick of getting annoyed.
Well, let's hear what you have to say. Let's hear your answer, and then we can go back to Christopher.
I'm just saying it is possible to take sugar out of products. There is a reformulation program going on. The food industry has not taken it seriously, and this is an attempt to make them take it seriously. The other way, if they don't do this, and Boris Johnson doesn't agree, is to regulate the targets. You have targets for each, as Chris Snowden knows, for all of these unhealthy things, you have targets to reduce the sugar and reduce the salt. And those are all practical targets.
They're practical targets, Christopher Snowden. What do you think of those practical ideas from Graham MacGregor?
Well, firstly, he knows that there isn't anything you can put in the Mars bar apart from sugar. Okay, so let's just get away from this idea that this can just be reformulation. People are going to carry on eating what they always say. It's not going to make any difference, and they're not going to pay any more money. Dimbleby's own report says it's going to cost £3 billion a year to the taxpayers through the tax. Okay, so clearly he is not anticipating the food industry removing all the salt and sugar from their products, and at least, unlike MacGregor, he is actually realistic about that and understands what's going on here. This is essentially a stealth tax. In fact, it's actually going to cost more than £3 billion. Our analysis looks like it's going to be more like £5 billion because there'll be less behavioural change than is anticipated.
Let's take that £3 billion.
Another stealth tax.
Let's just take that £3 billion figure. Let's say, for the sake of argument, it does cost £3 billion, Professor MacGregor. That's a tax that will, in some way, be put on to the taxpayer if they want to have sugary or fatty foods. Why should they have to pay that?
Well, I'm saying if the food industry reformulate, they won't have to pay it.
But Christopher Snowden, with respect, Christopher Snowden is saying that can't happen.
Let me take something like bread. Bread in the last 10 years had the amount of salt being added reduced by 30% across the board. Every bread in the UK has been reduced. And Chris Snowden doesn't acknowledge that's happened. And that has meant, with this reduction in salt intake across the population in all products, it's meant there's been a fall in blood pressure and a big fall in the number of people dying and suffering from a stroke. Now, Chris Snowden wouldn't care if he gets a stroke and is paralysed the rest of his life. But I'd feel very sorry for him, because as a doctor, it's a nightmare. And to try and prevent illnesses like that are totally preventable is ridiculous to say, I don't care about it. If you got it, Chris, you'd care about it, I can tell you.
Well, let's hear what he has to say, Christopher Snowden. Some pretty salty remarks there. What do you think of that?
I don't really understand what the point is. I don't understand the question.
I'm asking you, do you realise there's been a reduction in salt intake in the UK due to a programme of reformulation of all the products that are made by the food industry with less salt, which has been very successful?
I realise. I know that. I know you campaigned for that and then did the evaluation, so it's tremendously successful. It's very compelling stuff. I am sure I've been told by people who know about these things that it's quite easy to reduce the amount of salt in things like peanuts and crisps by 10, 15%. Once you get below there, people start to notice. And in ready meals and foods in which salt is integral. Salt is essential to life. We would be dead without it. Salt is an essential taste, essential flavour. You get rid of all the sugar and all the salt, there's not very much left in food, is there? Apart from fat, and the next campaign, of course, will be to reduce the fat. How does this
Graham MacGregor, just let him speak for a second and then we'll come to you. Just one at a time, please. Christopher, maybe finish your point.
How does this reformulation fantasy work in process, in practice? Well, since 2015, Public Health England have had a sugar reformulation programme. And the companies have been following it. And you can see clear evidence in things like breakfast cereals and yogurts. The sugar content has been declining. How much has the nation's sugar consumption from food declined? Not at all. Zero. Because they're not buying the foods that Graham MacGregor wants to sell. They're buying the foods that they like. And so long as people have a choice, they will continue to buy the foods they like. Unfortunately, with this plan, they're going to have to pay an extra £5 billion a year extra, at a time when inflation is already rising, at a time where we just had the deepest recession in 300 years. But the fanatics don't care about any about this. They don't care about ordinary people and the cost of living. They just have their ridiculous little plan, which will take years to finally fall apart and for them to be discredited. And the government is going to waste billions of pounds of our money before it finally realises that it cannot, in a relatively free society, control what people eat.
OK, Christopher Snowden, some strong points there. Graham MacGregor, another point I want to put to you is the fact that Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, has already distanced himself from this today, very, very quickly, within hours of this report coming out. What do you think of that? And what do you think of what Christopher Snowden is saying? Because people, in his view, will not eat food that doesn't taste as sugary or as salty as the food they want to eat, and you're actually just slapping them with £3 billion worth of taxes.
Well, first of all, the point about Boris Johnson, I don't know exactly what he said, but the point is, if he reads the report in detail, I think he's only read it superficially and probably listened to people like Chris Snowden, who are talking complete and utter rubbish, that we need to reform the food system in the UK. And this is a plan to do it. And one part of it is the reformulation of food to make unhealthy food more healthy, slowly, over a period of time. And they're given plenty of time to do this. And to not acknowledge that we need to do something about unhealthy food, and that we don't, according to Chris Snowden, need to do nothing about obesity or high blood pressure, is a ridiculous thing to look at. I suppose he'd just let everyone die of COVID-19. I mean, it just doesn't make sense to not say, look, we can prevent people suffering and dying from these illnesses. Should we do nothing about it? According to the Institute of Economic Affairs, we do nothing. We do nothing about COVID-19, nothing about obesity, nothing about high blood pressure. That is a ridiculous stance. There is a reformulation program going on. It has not been stuck to by the food industry, and we now need to make the food industry stick to it.
OK, let's hear. I have a final point from Christopher Snowden.
Well, presumably if you're in medicine and you're a senior doctor, you can just go around saying whatever you like and none of your colleagues ever try and correct you. It's the only explanation how Graham MacGregor can just come on here and just tell fib after fib after fib. I've been on talk radio several times in the last year defending lockdowns and saying we need to do more about COVID-19 and trying to control it. And the difference is, which people in public health often seem to miss, is that COVID-19 is an infectious disease. Obesity isn't. It's an issue for the individual. It is difficult for people to lose weight. I fully accept that. And that's why putting 1p on a packet of crisps isn't going to make any difference. All I can say is, we're dealing with fanatics. David Dimbleby seems to have fallen on that side of the argument. He's being convinced by people like Graham MacGregor, people who will come on television claiming that everybody who has diabetes in the UK has it because they're obese. I mean, this is fake news, isn't it? Post-truth age we're dealing with.
Thank you both very much indeed, Graham MacGregor there and Christopher Snowdon. This has been Talk Radio's Political Punch-Up. I'm Peter Cardwell and I'm off for a Mars bar.